Hello and welcome. So today I'd like to welcome to our Smarter Building podcast Robert Kumapley, who's the Chief of Enterprise Asset Management at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and has played a key role in the strategic planning and tactical implementation of a robust enterprise asset management program. Welcome. It's great to have you on the show, Robert.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
No problem at all. So, Robert, as with all of our guests, it'd be great to get an understanding of what led you into this position that you find yourself in today, and whether you can give us a bit of information about your background and your story.
Right. No, thank you. So I've been practicing engineering for over 35 years. And about 25 years ago, I moved into the enterprise asset management practice. So I had my Bachelor of Science in Engineering from Ghana, from the KNUST, and practiced engineering after that for 9 months with Knights Pearshold in the UK, and then went back to Ghana, came to the US, and got my master's at Purdue University, and then started practicing engineering in the US. I think one of the things that naturally pushed me into the area of asset management is that I like to solve problems and above and beyond design. So I started about 1994 is when I started a journey of getting into asset data collection, condition assessments, forecasting of asset conditions. And I really enjoyed it, but really also stayed in the design area of practice. And I think all those have come a long way to bring me into this enterprise asset management program that I lead. I also had a background in customer care for about 5 years. So I'm very customer oriented, trying to solve problems for people, making their life easier. And I think all those skill sets have really brought me to land in this leadership position.
Fantastic. Well, I have to come back. I'll make a note and I have to come back to the sort of differences in engineering between Ghana, the United Kingdom, and the United States. But in terms of your position at the moment,
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit more about your role and what you do for the Port Authority?
Yeah, so at a high level, my role is to bring all the port authorities' assets under one umbrella to enable and eliminate the silos, to enable data-driven decision making, right? So the port authority has airports. In the aviation industry, they have long span bridges, they have tunnels, we have ports, and also transit. So it's a very diverse set of assets that we really manage. But we've been managing this in silos. And my responsibility is to pull everything together, break down the silos, and we actually doing that through data standards so that everybody calls a pen across the agency. So by that way, we are able to assess our assets in a kind of a consistent way. So at a very high level, that's my job. We're currently eliminating all the varied legacy systems because all these line departments or line businesses have been operating in silos. So we are moving them into the Maximo platform as a start. And that's going to be the foundation of our registry. And so that's where we are now. We have about 4 facilities in going live and 2 more going live this year, and next year will be another 3. So we're making good progress, and I think we're making progress at this time. Yes.
Cool. So I think one of the interesting words in this whole sort of situation is asset. So
Yes.
a bridge is an asset, and then all those
Yes.
other elements that you put into the Maximo system are an asset. Is there any way you kind of
Okay.
differentiate between those two in terms of language, or is it, or do you just use asset to describe both? I guess.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. I think when I started this journey, the first question was, what is an asset, right? So you have different stakeholders. An asset means something different. For example, for finance, an asset may mean something different. For the maintainer, an asset may mean something different. For somebody who is doing inspections, an asset may mean something different. So the first day of conversation was to just bring all the stakeholders to the table and make sure that we have a consistent definition of what an asset is, so that at a certain level, that means the same thing to people. So we came up with 7 definitions, so that anytime you pick an equipment or product, if it fits one of those definitions, then it will be registered and then tracked, right? Whether you are doing inspections on it, not necessarily maintaining it, but you have to report on it, like the bridges, for example. We report on them every 2 years. So those 7 definitions generally cover all the assets that the Port Authority is interested in tracking. And that conversation took almost a whole day.
Can imagine. And in terms
Yeah,
of enterprise asset management, what does that mean for the Port Authority?
right. So the enterprise is that, the Port Authority is an enterprise which is consisting of different line businesses, right? So, like I said, we want to make sure that all the entities within the Port Authority are addressing and managing their assets, whatever they are, in a consistent way. So, if we want to say a pump, and that pump is a sump pump that's pumping water from the basement at different facilities, then we want to make sure that we are looking at them the same way. That means that the attributes, the units of measure, and the acronyms, the taxonomy is all the same. And I think that's where the asset management in silos is much easier than when you have an agency like ours, where you want everybody to call a pen or a pump a pump. They've been working in silos for 100 years. So I think that is the difference between asset management in silos versus enterprise asset management, where everybody has to call a pen a pen.
Okay. And in terms of the sort of enterprise asset management program, I saw a slogan that said it keeps the region moving. I think it was the slogan.
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
is the what can you talk to us about the value of your team and what it does, and how this enterprise asset management does keep the region moving?
So I think the 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 agency slogan of "Keep the Region Moving" is, I think, the what drives our focus in maintaining our assets, right? We want to make sure that those assets are available to our customers when they need to use them. So whether it's a bridge crossing or it's a path train that they need to take, we want to make sure that those assets are not failing when the customers or the public needs them. So in order to do that, we have to make sure that they are in great health. And the way to do that is through the asset management program, where we can track the condition of our assets and make sure that they are in good health, they are in good shape, they are in good state of good repair across the agency, so that they are available for the public to use. So if we have to keep the region moving, then those assets have to be working and working good. So I think if you look at the priorities, include safety, they include customer experience, they include employer of choice, and they include enhanced operation, 21st century global technology. All those are, when you put it all together, the enterprise asset management actually supports all those priorities.
Okay, so there's clearly a massive amount of value in having the strategy in place. In terms of
Definitely.
those looking at the scale of your operation and the fact that you've got an enterprise asset management strategy in place, I guess this is possible for all entities to a degree, or to one degree or another.
Yes.
What's the hardest thing about initiating the strategy or putting the strategy in place?
I think from my experience is trying to break the silos, right? So that it's difficult when people are doing work in silo and it's successful, and you're trying to break that silo to bring them to a common standard or a common platform, you know, and it comes with change, right? And change in culture also. So it's really a challenge when you're trying to drive change through standards, breaking down, and also change the culture, because they've always been doing their work, and people have been safely using our facilities, but that doesn't mean that we are doing things optimally, right? So if we want to, be more efficient in the way we spend our money, then we want to look at things that can give us the necessary data across the agency. So we don't want to be looking at the top 10 bridges or the top 10 airfields. Depending on the criticality, we should be able to put them all in one bowl and say these are the top 10 assets, irrespective of business. And I think that is what is the driver for me. Now, it is not easy for people who have been working in silos over the years to understand that, because for them they just need to go fix the pump, they just need to go fix it, right? And so now we're trying to gradually let them know that the collaboration is important. Maybe we've been buying the wrong equipment over the years, and maybe they are performing better at certain facilities than others. It could be due to corrosion. Maybe they are more exposed to the sea, but because we never looked at the enterprise, at the agency level, we may be missing out on certain things. And it affects everybody, including procurement, right? That we want to make sure that we are buying the right faucets. Maybe there is a certain level of pH in the water in a certain part of the facility versus others. So by looking at all the data across the agency, we can make better decisions, spend our money more effectively and wisely.
Okay. And in terms of, so just listening to that, in terms of the Port Authority, you get a lot of data. Are there any other organizations you share data with and best practices with in order to sort of inform that strategy? Or do you think there are any organizations you maybe should share data with? Obviously, being a kind of public authority or an agency, are there others in that
Right.
sort of ecosystem?
So that's a very good question. So we've been able to, like I said, the target is to break the silos, and we're doing that through a uniform, consistent data standard. So we have data standards and acronyms and attributes defined for 500 classes of assets and 3,000 subclasses. That took almost 2 to 3 years to complete. And so now we're in the place where we're trying to share that with our sister agencies, so that if they adopt that, it will help the industry as a whole. For example, if somebody has to collect data at, say, New York Housing Authority, they have buildings just like we do. They have administration buildings, fire protection systems. It will be more cost effective if people are aware ahead of time the type of standards we use. Then that would also enable us to exchange information in a seamless way. We don't have to pick up information and begin to recalibrate and re-clean the data. It will just be a one-to-one. So we have been reaching out, and other agencies have been reaching out to us, because it's a very difficult effort to build that type of standard. We have standards around where we tag our assets. For example, if you have an air handling system, you can just go into the standards database and say, for air handling systems, this is where tags are located, right? And so all those little things, the other agencies are beginning to reach out to us to adapt them, and we are sharing them. And I think ultimately we'll be at a place where we can share those detailed information. However, I think we've been working collaboratively, especially in the areas of emergency management, traffic management, where we are doing construction on bridges that are in series, we do exchange information. And I think these standards that we built will just enhance and the communication between the agencies at the asset level in terms of maintenance and operations.
Awesome. I think the power of that, having that standard as across as many agencies as possible. I mean, imagine it across the whole
Yeah.
of the US, being able to benchmark and
Oh,
create
yeah.
standards, and it might put a few manufacturing companies out of business as you all go for the sort of best performing assets. It might really sort of reduce down the variety of stuff that's implemented places, but it would mean
Correct.
you have best in class, which would be
Correct.
really good. Yeah, it'd be great.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I think in terms of data collection, the industry can now develop their own tools, right? And those tools will be consistent with these standards. So the Port Authority or the New York City entities can actually, because it's the same standard, they can bring the same tools over here to come and collect our data, which will make the cost of data acquisition much cheaper than it is today.
Okay. And how did you go about starting to collect this data? Was there's a lot to go at. I'm assuming you've mentioned rolling out to a couple of facilities at a
Right.
time in terms of all the asset data, but where do you start when you sort of implementing this kind of scale of project?
So it was a very interesting journey in the sense that we tried not to boil the ocean and just go. We looked at some of the systems and data structures that were in house, and then we brought the staff, subject matter experts within the agency to the table, and so we started defining what the hierarchy of the assets are, what we want location to look like. This was all done by in-house staff with my team that moderates the conversation. So we had work groups, a work group for asset hierarchy, a work group for work order management, a work group for problem cost remedy. And so that's how the whole work groups were set up. However, we did not want to just be setting up hierarchy of assets that were not in the field. So we took the risk of concurrently put out some task orders for people to go out to the field and collect information on the assets as well as the nameplates, so that we're just not making up attributes, right? Because there's a reason the nameplate is on a particular equipment. That is the type of information you are going to need to maintain that. So that helped us it took about almost 2 years, and that landed us around almost 500 asset classes and about 3,000 asset subclasses. So now we have a change management process where somebody says, well, I don't see my asset in the 500. I just have a new asset. They go through the change process to put in a request to add that asset class, and the work group votes to accept or reject that. So that is a continuing process, making sure that the line departments are very much aware of the new asset classes that are being added, because it may be already in the list. So every single type of asset has been voted on, all the 3,000 of them, believe it or not. And if somebody said, well, my line department was not there, we just go back to that system and you can tell them this person voted and represented you, because we are constantly having changes in stuff. And so you always want to remind people, that they were actually represented in that voting structure to maintain the standard. So, in short, that's how we strategize to make sure that we are not trying to put 1,000 classes or 500 classes together where there are only 200 of them in the field. So we're very tactical about that.
Fantastic. It sounds like you've got really good engagement with the teams and sort of this collaborative approach to implementing this strategy, which I can only imagine goes a huge
Yeah.
way to getting it done. As we are sort of a technology focused podcast, I've got to ask the question: how much of this is
Yes.
about that engagement? How much is about the process change, and how much is actually about getting the right technology in place to support the management of, I think
Right.
you said, 500 asset classes and 3,000
Yes.
asset types. So I'm pretty sure you don't want to be managing that on
Right.
pen and paper.
Yeah. So engaging the work groups, we've always focused on data, people, process, and technology, right? So the process is, how do they do their work? How is the data relevant to them? The people is a culture, right? So they have to see the value in what they are doing. And if they are going to use the systems that are going to depend on this data, then they need to be familiar with the hierarchy, right? And then from the data point of view, you want to do it where the data that they need today is available, but they can also scale it when there is a need to expand that, whether it's the new technology of AI that is going to need certain data requirements, that we are not going back to the table to recalibrate all that structure. So it has been, the focus has been that you want to make the solution scalable, you want to make it relevant, you want it to be flexible to adapt to existing technology and the future technology, and you want to make sure that they are implemented in a timely manner so they can continue to do their work. So it's a balancing act of all these variables, and at the end of the day, to make sure that everybody is comfortable and embracing the solutions that are on the table.
Okay. And in terms of once all this data is collected, you've
Yeah,
mentioned some of the kind of bits around adopting the best, sort of learning what are the best assets and implementing those, and
yeah.
learning from some elements of the data collected. But what else are you able to do with it? What are the practices that you're most proud of?
um I think once the data is collected, first of all, you want to make sure that the solutions that you are putting out there are not burdensome to the line departments, because it's not like the staff is increasing. So this is going to be a lot of data. So how do you QA/QC it? So I think you had asked about the technology in the last one. So one of our contractors, Symmetry, has helped us develop a database. So, for example, in that database, you want to make sure that the names do not collide, that there is no repetition of acronyms. And so a database can, anytime a new asset class is introduced, the database is scanned to make sure that the name doesn't already exist, the acronyms are in alignment. So that solution has helped us a lot to make sure that there is no duplication or repetition, especially of naming. Another tool in that technology is what we call the data template. So once we started going live, we have standard templates now that people can use to collect data. And if you follow and populate that data template, you can just go to the tool and drop your template in there, and it will tell you this template is only 70% complete. So now you've reduced several thousand man hours of manual work to within 2 minutes. You can just say this is 70% complete, and these are the areas where your gaps are. So that's one of the proudest moments, because it's going to be very difficult if people have to go through this manually and try to look, is this data ready to be uploaded into the system, right? Another product that I'm very proud of is the use of AI to 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 assess the photographs that have been taken. So, an example, there were about 23,000 photographs, and the particular line department was concerned because that means they have to pull people to actually manually look at this. But we were able to leverage the AI to say the naming of the photograph, the the numbers of the tag numbers and everything, you're able to read it, is clear, it's not blurry. And out of those, there were 134 photographs were rejected within 1 or 2 minutes. Everything was done. So we just went back to the contractor to say, you need to go back to the field to correct this 134. Otherwise, you have to go through 23,000 photographs manually to come up with the same outcome. So we are also looking at how this new technology can be leveraged to save money for the agency. So we are not spending money to do this and can free up money to actually fix the assets, right? So we want to make sure that these solutions are leveraged, the technology is leveraged, but most importantly, that we are the solutions we are putting out there is not burdening the people for which it is intended.
Fantastic. I think what you're doing um, sounds really good, and we see pockets of other organisations doing similar things and collecting enterprise asset data. You've kind of mentioned that some of your
Right.
sister agencies are beginning to start their journey.
Yes.
Is there anybody you took
Yes.
inspiration from in terms of organisations? And is there any advice you would give to other organizations looking to start this process? And that can be across industries or within your own sort of space.
I think our executive director is a person that actually inspired me the most because he had a vision, and I remember when I first engaged him, he asked me the question. He says, "Why do you think you're the best person for this job?" And I said, "I like the vision, I like the mission and the focus of making access available to people. And I want to be the one to lead this program that is actually befitting of the agency." And I mean, we both connected from that. I like people who are leaders who have vision, right? So JFK, when he was president, said America would take man to the moon and bring man back safely. He was not an engineer, but he inspired a bunch of NASA engineers who successfully delivered that vision. So I think my inspiration is to have leaders that can believe things that may seem impossible, but they are supportive with the vision that they have, knowing some of the ways that we can make it happen successfully. So for me, most leaders focus on day to day tactical issues. They're just trying to solve the problem of the agency. I think he does that. And in addition to that, he's very strategic. And I think that's what inspires me the most. And that's what actually brings me because I know he has interest in what we're doing. And I think most enterprise programs, asset management programs, they get started and they fail because people do not see to the end because they're like, why are we spending money when we can just be fixing the corrective issues, right? Forgetting that when those data are in place, it will help you to make better informed decision and even be able to prolong the life of your assets, which will free up more money to do other things. So he believed in this program and not getting frustrated about when is it going to get done. We are working, and that's why we are also trying to be responsible to make sure that any money that we are spending, we are leveraging technology to save man hours, right? Not to be going back to get, I need 1,000 hours to I need 1,000 hours to solve this issue or that issue. So that's Rick Cotton is our executive director, and he's really the one that inspires me.
Fantastic. I think from what I'm hearing, you need the inspiration to kind of see the bigger picture with this kind of implementation, and then you need the people who are capable of getting it done as well. So that's
Right.
all. Um, in terms of if we take a bit of a pivot away, another big thing about this podcast, and we look to focus on is sustainability. Can you give some
Yes.
examples of how effective asset sort of management can drive increases in sustainability and improvements in that area?
That is a great question. I think when we talk about carbon footprints, for example, we say steel, right? You produce steel to replace a bridge. You're going to create a certain amount of carbon footprint, right? But if we're able to maintain these bridges to extend the useful life, so instead of replacing the bridge, say twice in 50 years, maybe we replace it once in 50 years, we are indirectly reducing the carbon footprint. So that's why I always tell people when you get into resiliency, right? Are those pumps ready for the storm that is coming? The fact that you went there, you tuned it, doesn't mean that it's actually ready for the storm, because maybe it's near the end of life or other things that the asset management could help give you data so that you are better prepared. So if we can increase the useful life of our assets, then we don't have to replace them. Then we don't need to have new steel produced or concrete, because those bridges will last longer. So the times that number of times you replace it in a life cycle is going to be minimal. And I think that's a great contribution, you know, to sustainability and resilience as well.
Okay. And another question I seem to ask quite a lot is around digital twin, and whether, I personally see enterprise asset management as a fantastic outcome of potentially building a
Correct.
digital twin. We're creating
Correct.
digital replications in the form of data of what's actually going out on
Correct.
in the field.
Correct.
What are your feelings towards the term digital twin, and what it can bring to the Port Authority?
Huge. I think anything that brings visual functionality to the table will always help people to work more efficiently, right? So that digital twin may also have to connect into other systems, right? So for example, you may have a digital twin of a terminal, and that terminal may have work order systems that are connecting to it. It may also have some IoT sensors, and then people can actually visually go there and see what's going on, right? But in order for that to be done correctly, I've always believed that this issue of standards need to be paid attention to. So we cannot have a pump in a digital twin called differently, and then you have a pump in Maximo called differently, and then you have a pump in GIS called differently. Then you're not going to have the optimal solution. You're going to spend a lot of time mapping assets instead of just connecting to assets. And I think the advantage for digital twins to really derive the full benefits has to be supported by strong foundation of data standards, which is why we spent a lot of time putting that data structure together. So now we can take the digital twin, create the maintenance objects, and connect into Maximo so people can see it. And then you can do a chart of analysis. You can do many things. But if the data standard is not that strong, then you're going to spend again a lot of money trying to map assets, and you could still have a digital twin, but it may not be operated and managed in an effective way. So I think digital twin is a future because it helps people see what is out there visually, and I think it's something that we can't do without in the near
Yeah,
future.
but I agree. I mean, personally, I see digital twin as an ecosystem of smart
Sure.
technology, sure, but it's all underpinned by very high quality data captured through design, build, operate,
Correct.
and then also the process. So
Correct.
the process has got to be, we enter data
Yeah.
somewhere once, and then it's surfaced and fed into other systems, and you can
Exactly.
present it in a flash format, and that's sometimes the end of the digital twin journey that
Right.
people really like and focus on. But
Yeah.
I guess
Right.
there's way more to it in my eyes, and it's all starts with getting that high quality data
Yeah.
to feed the twin.
Correct. And that data has to be supported by good standards, right? So that the interoperability of the data exchange, those can. And I think about it like if you are onboarding new maintenance staff, and let's say they go to say Terminal A, huge facility, and you're looking at a valve and you want to do a chart of analysis, the experience, long time facility maintainer, they will know what the impact of that valve is. But somebody who is new may not know. A digital twin, for example, you can go there and say, tell me this valve, the impact of this valve when I shut it off. And it will just draw the line for you, right? So all of a sudden, this person doesn't need 30 years of experience. On the top of it, they can just go there, query that through natural language, overlaid with a digital twin, and boom, the outcome is there. So I mean, the impact of savings is significant.
Agree. And in terms of creating those standards that you've referred to a few times, do you think that there could be legislative support to creating those standards? Do you think it's something that should be pushed harder by government, or do you think it's more of the construction ecosystem to drive that
Yeah,
themselves, ourselves?
yeah. That's a very good question. I think, you know, and I'll say this and I mean well about it, right? Most of the agencies are only motivated when there's a legislation to support something that needs to be done. For example, bridge inspections. You have to inspect bridges every 2 years. If those legislation were not in place, many agencies may not necessarily do it every 2 years. So I think something like this for the efficiency, especially when data is now an asset. I think data has far outstripped oil as the one of the biggest assets. Is now data, right? Is the biggest companies today are data companies. So data acquisition is actually an expensive effort, and I think once the standard is there across the board, there will be significant savings, right? So if it's legislated, a standard is legislated, just like any ASTM or whatever, I think you derive some savings and some benefits with data exchange. Everybody will know what it is because it's a standard. I believe that it could be, but also I think agencies and entities should also be motivated to realize that I could get some benefit out of it, which is what I said. Our executive director, Rick Cotton, he didn't wait for any legislation. He took the bull by the horn to spend the money so that we can get a standard, right? Because he kind of had that vision. And so, but I think for nationwide, there may have to be something like that. But it has to start from somewhere for people to know what the end look like. And I think we could be one of those that could contribute to that conversation.
Fantastic. That's great. Just coming towards the end of the sort of podcast now, and just wanted to ask a few questions about the future. So, off the back of this successful
Yeah.
EAM implementation, what's next for you personally? First,
Yeah. So one of the, I think, so if I hear you right, you're asking what is the journey hereafter,
yep,
or even here now, right? So there are two things. While I'm here, I'm actually engaging some of the colleges in the region because I think those students that are coming out of college, if they are able to understand what we are doing today, they will be industry ready and they can build on it. So I've been intentional in reaching out to some of the colleges like Rutgers and NJIT to embed myself in some of the classes to share what all this means, right? Because if this is all about Robert and I go, then that's where it's going to die. But if we can create disciples in the classroom that could come and build upon this, then we're going to make more headway. So I have a couple of classes coming up in the spring, and I'm not teaching them by myself, but I'm just embedding myself in those classes to share some of, for example, how do breaking the silos of using data standards? How do you leverage AI in, say, roof condition assessment or photo, tagging, things like that, so that you can get them to think. And I think you also help them appreciate better the courses that they are taking and how they could begin to look at applying these new technologies even way after I have left the industry. Um, so that I'm doing now, and I plan to do a lot of that when I leave. But I'm also passionate about nonprofit work. So I have a special needs school in Ghana, and we have a special needs nonprofit here, and we've been able to give out over almost $200,000 to families in need, and that is what actually brings me the
I can
most
imagine.
joy. People ask me, "What is it?" It's not actually the engineering. If I didn't have to, the engineering just gives me an opportunity to earn money to live. But what actually brings me joy is this. So I plan to dedicate about 60 to 70% of my time between that school in Ghana that has 30 kids on special needs and learning disabilities, and also the nonprofit here. We have sessions to support families. And all this is motivated because I have a son on the autism spectrum. And when that happened, my wife and I didn't have any understanding, and we were literally at each other's throat when we realized that it's better we fight autism than to be at each other's throat. And so since then, we found joy even in the midst of the challenge of seeing a son. I always had a vision that my son will play football, will go out. Despite the fact that all those are gone and he's not able to function that way, there are other ways that he's being a blessing to the rest of the world. And I think that's my vision. Maybe 30-40% teaching in the classroom, and if there is consulting, that's fine, but I don't think there's anything else, you know, beyond what I'm doing here in the industry that I'll contribute, or the opportunity that the Port Authority gave me to build here. I think in the private sector, I'm not going to get that. So, and I like to innovate. I like to problem solve. I don't want to just get into doing work for the sake of work. So,
Fantastic, Robert. It's always awesome to hear about such worthwhile causes, and somebody with such a dedication to doing good. It's a great thing you're sort of looking to do there, and a fantastic way to end the podcast. So thank you very much for your time
yeah,
today. I found it really interesting. Trying to get control of such a big estate with such huge assets. And it sounds like you guys have made really, really good progress. So I'm sure our listeners will have been sort of enthused to hear about that too. So thank you very much for your time. And I wish you all the best.
and I want to take the opportunity to thank you for giving me the platform to share some of the thoughts. And really, you guys are doing a great job. I listened to you. And so when you reached out, I was really appreciative of the opportunity. And I hope your guests and your audience has found this useful as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Robert.